Hi there. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that later in this episode, there's some language that may not be appropriate for younger listeners. It's because we were talking about appropriate ways to communicate and what could be some red flags. And today's guest, Cindy Wagman, is describing a time that a gentleman she was speaking with used some really inappropriate language with her and her team. So because of this, if you have a younger person with you, maybe save this episode for a later time when you can listen on your own. Thanks very much. Let's get to the episode. Good day and welcome to the Leading with Nice interview series podcast. My name is Matthew Ewell and we want to help you inspire others, build loyalty, and get results. Now, today's guest, as usual, I'm very excited about, and I came about being introduced to her in a really unique way. I signed up for what looked to me to be like a really interesting webinar, and sure enough, it was. I learned a lot. It was great. And I was like, yo, this person, I would like them to be my neighbor. I want to sit and wax poetic about the way we approach business over like maybe a glass of wine and a barbecue. And so I reached out and said, hey, can we talk some more? Because she is so good at what she does, I had to wait a little while to get a slot. But today I'm joined by Cindy Wagman, who's the principal of the Good Partnership. She helps nonprofits, and I'm so excited to have her here today. Cindy, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Perfect. Okay, so again, if you listen to this podcast, you know what we're all about, and that we're ultimately trying to share with you people who practice leadership in a way that we think is the right way into the future, and also practices great values. Cindy's one of those. And the first question I have for you is this. So I want to focus on issues nonprofits are commonly grappling with and how the Good Partnership is helping them. And I know that you help with clarity, but to start, I'm inspired. I'm sorry, but I'm more curious about what inspired you to get in the world of fundraising and nonprofits? What's your story?
Yeah. So I've always been involved in the nonprofit sector. I've always volunteered in high school, and I definitely found that felt very comfortable for me. And I didn't really think of a career in this space until I was in university. And actually, during the summer one year, I met two professional fundraisers, and I thought, oh, I'm already doing this. I was fundraising. I was leading different fundraising initiatives at school for local women's shelters. And I thought, oh, I can get paid for this. How cool is that? So really, that's how I came into it. I, at that point, made a decision that that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And so have been fundraising ever since. And a lot of what I would say has sort of been the driving force behind my business is trying to do good as a business that serves nonprofits. And there's been some really interesting decisions we've had to make along the way through that.
Yeah. So let's dig into that. I remember when I was one of a woman in my life who's been really insightful and mentor to me. I had a name for my company, and it had a lot of emotional meaning to me. And I had used this Leading with Nice title for a book I wrote a long time ago. And she said to me, Matthew, I love your company name. I get why it's important to you, but you just got to call it Leading with Nice. That's who you are. And I said, oh, but what about those companies that they hear that and they write it off? She's like, you don't want to work with them. And so tell me about the Good Partnership. I can imagine there was some not a struggle in a negative way, but there is definitely some processing in arriving at it. Tell me, I'd love to learn more about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's been, I would say, two significant guiding principles for us, or for me as a leader of the company. The first is to live our values. So we have a strong commitment to social justice, to anti-oppression and anti-racism work. And we have made decisions along the line that I would say probably not the most profitable, but that aligned with our values. We've given up big partnerships that have served us very well, but there were reasons why they didn't make sense for our values and walked away from them. We've said no to work that didn't align. We've clients that we won't work with because we don't agree with. They're not aligned, or their practices are not aligned with those values. And even, the products and services we offer. So when I started consulting, I was researching, okay, what do consultants do? I didn't really know. And a lot of it is giving advice.
So I was going to say, if you can actually, we can shift gears, you can tell me what consultants do. That would help me as well. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I mean, it's really good advice, right? A lot of consultants have great experience. They know what they're doing, and they are in the business of giving that 30,000 foot perspective to organizations so that they have clarity and can move forward. Working with our niche, small nonprofits, which was the other decision that we made to exclusively work with small nonprofits, I learned really quickly in practicing and giving that advice and doing more traditional consulting work that that's not where they struggle, or that's not only where they struggle, and that it felt really uncomfortable for me to take a lot of money, especially a lot of money for a small organization, to take a lot of money and only give advice, knowing quite confidently that advice would not ever turn into action. And so a lot of what we do as a company is focused on trying to get organizations into meaningful action. And it looks very different than other consulting agencies.
So what was the genesis then of the good partnership? Tell me about the philosophy of that then.
So it's sort of, I don't want to say I fell into consulting, but I was at a point in my life where I was in a very comfortable job. I was the director of development at the business school at the University of Toronto. For anyone who knows, it's very corporate, very big institution. But my background, I have a degree in women's studies. I worked in small organizations. And while I was on mat leave with my second kid, I was approached by a mentor of mine who said, I'm working with this really great organization. They need someone to do a capital campaign. Would you be interested? And my mentor was a consultant. And through conversations with her and a couple other people, I said, I would be interested in doing the campaign if I can do it as a consultant. And I mean, really for the first time in my career, I felt like I could ask for what I wanted, which is really scary. But I said, these are my terms. If you're interested, I'd love it. I would be so delighted. It was a fantastic, I'm happy to share the organization is called Hot Docs. They're a documentary film festival and organization. And they, I had that job. I had all the things. I certainly didn't need this work, but it was exciting for me. It was exciting to do it as a consultant. So they said yes, and we did that, and it gave me enough stability to start the business, because at the time, my older son would have been about 4. My younger son would have been about 6 or 7 months old. And I live in downtown Toronto, which is expensive. And so it gave me that cushion that I think a lot of consultants don't necessarily have. And then it grew again from trying things, listening to the clients that we were serving, and trying to understand what works for them and how we can really give them value.
Yeah, I think there's for sure there are consulting opportunities where it's simply giving advice, but I think most organizations today. I had somebody say to me recently, like, "Oh, I'm thinking about doing what you do, just give advice." And I was like, I don't know if that's true or not. If I just give advice, like there's so much, or you'll train on something, and then it's like, I'm just going to do it for you. It's just like, let me just do it. It's going to be way better, and you're going to be happy because the outcome will be great.
Yeah.
And it's about knowing that where that line is of how much, to speak into.
Yeah. And really what the client needs, there is a lot of need for that
Yeah.
advice, for
Mm.
guidance.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the more I'm learning about, I'm actually studying to be a coach, actually a neuro coach, looking at how our brain
Mhm.
guides our decisions and how we change the shortcuts in our brains. Anyways, I'm
Mm.
working around that, and there is a lot of advice and work that leaders need, but there's
Mm.
also hands-on getting it done. I always
Mhm.
say in fundraising, success comes from consistent implementation
Mm.
more than anything else. And so a lot of our services, and actually this is an area that we're growing, is doing that. We work with
Yeah.
organizations for extended periods of time, consistently doing their fundraising operations and running their fundraising program.
Yeah.
And they're happy, we're happy because things are getting done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought when I started doing this, I'd be going from project to project. In fact, like a consultant who did what I was trying to do, and they did it in the late 90s, early 2000s. They explained it like, 3 months and then like a little runway to find a new contract. And I think we started with 3 contracts and we're still doing 2 of them. And we have not dropped one since. I mean, it's so weird.
Yeah.
And then you look at it and you're like, this is the third Christmas party I've been to with you. You're like, how did that happen? How am I even at your Christmas party? This is crazy. Uh, so
Yeah.
listen, so this is great. I like people are listening to this already and they're thinking like, oh, like what Cindy's saying is really resonating. So maybe can you give that person some tips? Like what are some things if they look around their organization and they answer yes to this, they might be giving you a call. So what are some of those indicators that they might see that like, okay, I need Cindy and her company's help?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ones. The first is if you are, or you or anyone in your organization is responsible for fundraising, but you really don't want to do it,
Mm.
you're a really good fit for my book, which is called Raise It, The Reluctant Fundraisers Guide to Raising Money Without Selling Your Soul, or online course, or working
Oh, I'm
directly
gonna.
with me.
I want you to. If you miss it, I totally get it. It's so embarrassing to pump your own stuff.
It's so
I'm
hard.
gonna say it again. It
Okay.
is the Reluctant Fundraisers Guide to Raising Money Without Selling Your Soul.
Yeah.
If you missed it, I totally get it. You don't want to pump yourself up, but it's worth checking out. So that's the book.
Thank
So first, go
you.
on, keep going.
Yeah. So I'm doing and really growing a lot in the area of looking at, again, the neuroscience behind our reluctance to fundraise as a sector,
Mm,
and to help people overcome their mental models around fundraising so they can get out of their own way. So that, if that sounds like you, if it feels like you are constantly living in the ideas phase but never can figure out how to turn that into action, it's because your brain is
mm,
yelling at you to stop, and we can work on that. The other big thing is if your organization is at a point where you're ready to invest in fundraising, like maybe you're thinking about hiring your first fundraising staff, or maybe you had a fundraising staff, 18 months ago and they lasted for 6 months and it didn't really
mm,
work out well. And you're really
mm,
frustrated with that whole, I don't have a big budget, so I can't afford someone with a lot of experience, but I
mm,
can't afford to manage someone without a lot of experience.
mm,
That's also where we come in and we fill that gap, that really sweet spot of, you don't have to have a huge budget. You have to be able to invest. It's like hiring a junior staff person. But our network of consultants come in and they run the fundraising program. They're so experienced, efficient, no BS, and they get things done. They take the work off of the shoulders of the executive director instead of
mm.
hiring someone in house, which usually adds to the overwhelming work of the executive director. So those, I would say, are the two sweet spots if you're listening to
Yeah,
this.
there's so much like, okay, you'll meet somebody who's been in a a development role for like 15 years and does a great job. And then you'll meet a lot of people who have been at like, there's so much turnover, right? For various reasons. It's not a fault of anybody. It's just, there's lots of reasons. And I love, I want you to hear this, listeners, or if you're watching this podcast, Cindy just said, it's like hiring a junior staff member. And I'm not sure if you remember from earlier on in this conversation when Cindy talked about running U of T's or a part of U of T's development. That is not so. For the cost of a junior development person, you get a lot more than that, and that's a great part of consulting too, right?
Exactly.
I gotta be honest. Like when I consult with nonprofits in the communications or technology piece, and they're looking at development, I actually often recommend consultants because it's one of those things like communications as well. You don't always need to have somebody on staff. Like there could be even if it's 2 months a year where they're kind of sitting around twiddling their thumbs, it's wasted money, So I like that model. So you mentioned a few of it. You mentioned a few of them. So what's happened now is somebody said, "Oh, that is me. That is me," and they're going to stop listening to this podcast. They're going to go get into work tomorrow, and they're not going to call. So what are these roadblocks that these small nonprofits run into where they just kind of stops them from making that leap?
Okay, so I could talk forever about this, which is fundraising is like the dirty F word of our sector, especially for small organizations. And so most people who are probably listening to this, they didn't get into this work to raise money. That wasn't their calling. They're here because they want to change the world. They want to do good things. Yeah. They're executive directors or, whatever their role is within the organization, program staff, what have you. That's what they're comfortable with. And we hear stories over and over and over again in our sector about how bad fundraising is or how it's a necessary evil. Mm-hmm. And what happens is our brains start to make decisions we're not aware of. I call it autopilot around fundraising that prevent us from ever getting started. So if we understand how the brain works and the neural networks, our brain creates shortcuts to make decisions really, really quickly. So we're not aware that those decisions are happening, but our brain is making them on autopilot. And 90% of the decisions we make every day are completely unconscious. And the conscious decisions we make every day, there are about 35,000 of them. So that gives you a indication of perspective. And what happens is some of these shortcuts are really great. I watched my kids learn how to read. I saw how much practice they need just to understand how to read the word "the," right? These shortcuts in our brains make going through the world a lot easier and more efficient, but sometimes they don't serve us. And in our sector, a lot of the shortcuts are that fundraising is icky or that our work just doesn't have the same value. We shouldn't get paid it competitively because, there's a martyr syndrome that we're doing this because of the mission. There's a lot of internalized beliefs around fundraising as a really problematic power dynamic, which in some ways it really is, right? Traditional capitalist philanthropy can be very problematic for small social justice-based organizations. But what happens when our brain is on this autopilot, we don't take a step back and evaluate those decisions. We take it as truth. And so really what's happening is our brain likes to protect us from harm. And as a sector, we hear that fundraising is harmful to us. It's uncomfortable. We don't want rejection. We don't want to take money from people who we think are bad. There's so many things. And so we just shut it off. Our brain, without even giving us notification, is just saying, nope, we're not doing that. And in order to move forward, we have to start to rewire those shortcuts and really understand that there's there are different models of fundraising, and fundraising, I always say fundraising doesn't just fund your mission, but the activities you do in fundraising can also enhance it if you do it
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah, when you were speaking about, the dirty word of fundraising, I was thinking about when I work with a nonprofit, and one of our communication experts or content managers is like, okay, like here's some language that we're going to use that will really drive people to your Give Now page, because they'll be really self motivated. And they're like, well, that language seems pretty salesy, and we'll be like, yeah, great, right? And they're like, well, no, that's not who we are. It's not we're not talking about the beauty and passion of this. And I'm like, yeah, because no one will care. And I'm sorry, I hate to tell you that, but like, it's just how it is.
Yeah.
And we have a
Yeah.
real problem with it, right? It's
Yeah.
and it's not just social justice issues. Like, I've worked with animal care nonprofits where it's just like, they should just love the animals. We shouldn't capitalize on their cuteness. I'm like, cuteness is the best. Like, help me out here.
And honestly, I always say it's not up to us to make assumptions about our donors.
100%.
If ever you're in doubt around how they think or feel about the work, listen to them, ask them, and you'll get a much clearer idea of what messaging is actually going to resonate, right? Like, we really do project a lot of our own feelings and beliefs onto what we think our donors think and feel, and almost always wrong.
Yes. I bet you go in and you ask 3 or 4 questions, and it helps you understand who their audience is. And then you repeat back to them what they said, and they're like, no, that's not what it is. That happens to me all the time. I'm like, but you just told me this. They're like, yeah, but we really want to talk about this. I'm like, I get you might want to talk about it, but it's not what's going to drive interest. So, totally.
And there's an overlap, right? There's definitely been a swing. There's been a lot of swings in our sector around fundraising and communications, around messaging, etc. And there's some people who think like we should just do anything to get the money in, and then there's some people who think we can't find a common ground with our donors. And the reality is there's a middle where our language as an organization, our messaging, our values, our mission absolutely overlaps with those of our donors. That's what we're looking for. And then we lean into that overlap. And I've had conversations with, so the first thing is there are some donors who shouldn't be given to your organization. That's okay. It's okay to say no if you're getting red flags that someone really is giving to you for reasons that are against your mission. But also, you can bring your donors along for some education, but that's not in the same breath of asking for money. So there's a lot of space there.
Yeah, we worked with a food bank who they had been offered a princely sum from a payday lending organization. And so I said, listen, let's do some research. Let's look and see what goes on. And the data came back that like our clients were their main customers, and it led to a perpetuity of poverty. And I said, so like, your decision. So there might be a reason why this company wants to give you a bunch of money. It may not be the same reason you want that money. So that was a big conversation we had, and and the decision was made. So, but I hear you on that.
What was the decision?
They took the money. So so I stopped. Yeah, we stopped working with them as part of that reason, because hey, listen, I felt, and my colleagues at work at Leading with Nice felt that like it was, there's a Robin Hood model where you steal from the rich to give to the poor, and then there's that model which kind of felt like stealing from the poor to give to the poor.
Yeah,
and I was like, I wasn't, I left full time work also to like, I remember saying to my wife to do consulting. I said, I either want to work less and make the same, or work the same and make more. There's no work more, make more. I don't want that. I just want to live an awesome life, right? I've missed too much. And so that mindset really allows us to walk away and not not worry. And, did it mean it put off a vacation for another year that you wanted to go on? Yeah, it did. But like, I would have been felt very guilty on that vacation. So
yeah. No, I think you made the right decision.
yeah,
I can't imagine. I mean, from what I know about those companies, but yeah, we've absolutely sat. I mean, I and my team, and we were, three. I wouldn't call us young anymore. One of them was young, but like we're in our, late 30s, two of us. We sat down with a prospective client one time, and he literally said, he's like, "Oh yeah, fundraising is like." I mean, I don't even know if I can say this word. He's like,
well, we can always bleep. Don't worry, it's a
we
family
can
show.
bleep it out. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, like it's like pouring yourself out.
Yes.
And I was like, you can't, you can't say that to me and my team. And it was the most awkward conversation.
Yeah.
And I ghosted that client. I was like, I don't even have the tools to be able to call someone out on that. Like I
know.
That was so difficult, but I said, I just was like, no, this is not. If you're calling us whores in our first meeting,
there's so many levels of problems. I just we'll move on from this in a second, but I watched the morning show, which is on Apple TV, and there in one of the segments, spoiler alert if you haven't watched it yet, but it's not a big part of the story, so don't worry. Spoiler alert: this season 2 of the morning show, the weather person, in talking about Groundhog Day, says the groundhog would be my spirit animal, and the producer says, "Hey, listen, like, totally makes sense that you would say that, but it's appropriating Indigenous culture. So tomorrow, can you just apologize for it?" And does a bad job of apologizing, but I understand that level of unawareness, but like clearly you're talking to 3 women and you use the description "whoring yourselves out." That is a whole nother level of unawareness, right?
Yeah. And like, no. We made some
you're going to need a different kind of consultant in a little while if you keep doing that, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Well, you made the great decision too, I think. I'm going to congratulate you on that. Okay. So last but not least, I just want to talk on this for a few minutes. Give us, I want to give a potential client of yours a little head start. So you're going to show up, and what are some common things you'll want to work on right away? What are you going to want to find out from them so you can really get digging in?
So the number one thing, I mean, I always like to go to get from clients before we even start is just understanding where they're coming from, right? Like we do a big discovery process where we want to know where, we can't look to the future without understanding the past. So where has your funding come from in the past? How did it feel to do that? All of that I think is really important. Very often we try to jump to the solution, but we have to properly define the problem. So that's the first thing. And part of that is systems and understanding like where you keep information, which sounds like a really like nitpicky thing, but you'd be surprised. Like a lot of organizations don't have good ways of tracking information. So you wouldn't be surprised. You've done it. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with spreadsheets. Absolutely. But think about that. And especially for organizations or for leaders of organizations that want to create a lasting legacy for their organization to live on beyond their time there, you have to have good systems. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the number one thing, and I say this over and over and over and over and over again, is listen to your donors, get to know them. And my favorite way of doing this is with donor meetings. I mean, yes, you can do surveys and all that kind of stuff, but if you can, have a donor meeting a week where you're just listening to their stories, why they support you, what they care about, you won't even need us, quite frankly, because you're going to find that fundraising that's going to work for you. That is the number one thing that we do. We start with every single client. I teach it in every single way I teach fundraising. So many people are reluctant to do it. There's so many stories going on in our head that think it's very scary and unsafe, but it's really valuable. There's no ask. It's just listening and curiosity, being authentic. That is the number one piece of advice I can give to an organization, hands down.
I love it. There's one of my favorite nonprofits, the Muskoka Woods Youth Foundation, does every week in the summer does a thing called the President's Dinner, and they invite them up to the summer camp, and one of the chefs there comes from like a fancy pants background, so he does like a special dinner. It's pretty low cost for the foundation, but it looks really fancy. And about 10 donors are just there to talk about exactly that. And I can't tell you, like, there's no ask, but there's usually large donations are left behind just because they were treated like human beings and shown appreciation. So
yeah,
I love that.
It works for corporate donors, foundations, high-level individual donors, but it also works for your monthly donors or like broad-based support, community donors, everyone. The more you understand your supporters, the more you can scale your fundraising, the more you can, ask in meaningful ways, create your fundraising strategy in a way that actually is going to get you results. Like, it is so foundational, and yet so many people don't do it.
Last thing, totally off topic, but I think it actually does relate to what we do, what you do, what I do. And I had a coworker that used to say it's all in the presentation. And so I know you have put some thought and care into your background here on video. Tell us just about, like, to give your people who are watching this on YouTube and being like, oh, I like Cindy's little nook. What would you, because you do this intentionally. Yes, this is what I imagine. Yeah. Same with mine. My secret is like, this is a curtain back here. People don't know this. It's just like a curtain I use.
Oh, I like it.
So if you are talking to a fundraiser who's going to be maybe making some connections over Zoom or whatnot, give us a few tips on making a good space.
Okay, so I actually heard from a woman who's very research oriented. I didn't look into the research, but she was saying that they've done some research that plants, greenery, increase trust on Zoom calls. So I have, it's fake, little fake plant here. And so that's that. I changed my background recently. And then I try to keep it not too cluttered. I like also fake flowers. And then this is just a fun fact. I have a very modern aesthetic, but I have these little figurines that belong to my great grandmother. She collected them, and it's part of my memory of her. So I have those there, and some of my favorite books. And sometimes I'll pull books and recommend them to people. So I have those there handy. But the most intentional was the plant.
I like that. I like I have a tiny one. It's I asked for the plants that need the least amount of anything. And this is what I got. But I like the idea. I'm going to add some more greenery. I like that idea. So I have some Lego in a bee picture. Nice. That's pretty much what I is. All right, well, listen, Cindy, before we go, a few thank yous. Just before this interview today, I got off the call with Amber Tompkins, who's our education and training coordinator, and she's just like working in this project so I can do this. Naomi Grossman is my EA, and she helps get all these questions ready. She helped get us coordinated and booked together. Jamie Hunter, if you've seen this on social media, which is probably what brought you to this podcast, he did all that work to get it out there. Austin Pomeroy is our audio editor. He's going to, you know what? I'm actually going to do a little preamble before this and not bleep out the words. I think it's important. I think that's actually some of the best learning. No, I really do. Like, that was real talk. So we're not going to bleep it out, but I will do a little bit of your children may not want to be around this. Yes. I want to use the word saucy language. That's really what it is. But no, Austin's going to make sure he edits that great. Jeff Anhorn takes a video then and then makes it amazing. And while I'm doing all of this, and we talked about before we started recording, my wife's upstairs making sure the kids stay quiet. So thank you, Allison, for making this podcast possible today too. And Cindy, of course, to you. And I think one of your youngsters was dust busting, and he He put a pause on that. He put a pin in that dust busting until later. So I thank him for that as well, too. Cindy, have a great day. We'll talk to you again. Oh, people can find you at where?
thegoodpartnership.com, The Good Partnership on most social media, or just look me up, Cindy Wagman.
Perfect. All right. Have a great day. We'll talk to you again.